let's back off this a little bit, and we'll continue to feed on you and use you, unless of course they're looking for another host. But I'm not sure there's any other host left. Unless they just completely kill the host, and now we're just overrun with this parasitic, environment. In which case, what are they going to feed off of? They'll ultimately consume themselves. That's a whole other story. But this is where I think that's where the discussion has to happen. So but it's not going to, because it's a completely erroneous set of assumptions based on a paradigm that has been created to trap and keep people in a very deep state of illusion and fear, obviously. But if they want to solve the crisis, they would just zero out the debt. So you know what? Here you go. Let's start all over again. Let's start all over again. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at all your resources and everything that you have as a country and everything that you have invested in hard assets. Let's go into the Austrian School of Economics. And you know what? That's what you got. And you know what? We'll even count people. We'll even say each person is worth X amount. And that's your 0 point. That's where you're starting from. And everything's added up, and everybody gets to start from scratch all over again. And then you'd have to wipe out currency trading and floating currencies and all that stuff. And then people could have a better, and then you have, I would say, put in a universal wage so that everybody everywhere is making the same amount of money. It would be, let's say, a universal minimum wage, maybe $15 an hour, everywhere. Everywhere. Why not? You have $15 an hour working in Myanmar, or $15 an hour working in, I don't know, Mountain View, minimum. By the way, if you make $15 an hour in Mountain View, you're living in somebody's garage. Mountain View's in the center, really, of Silicon Valley. So, just zero out the debt. But they don't want to. Why? Because the debt is the hammer of control. It is the hammer and the leverage of control. So this is what Sarkozy says. Europe has never been in so much danger than Sarkozy. He worried about the risk that Europe will explode and urged that an agreement be found because there are only a few weeks left to make the decisions. He called for more solidarity, more discipline, and more governance within the Eurozone. An agreement on Friday is crucial, he said. We won't have a second chance. Well, England got in the way of that. What's that all about, by the way? David Cameron comes in from the sideline and basically, stabs that referendum right in the gut. Where did that come from? Did that come from the Queen? Are they having kind of a warring cash crisis amongst the elite in Europe? Is that what's going on? And we don't even know about it? These are crazy, crazy, crazy times. Absolutely crazy times. So when you look at somebody like Tim Tebow, right, and you see what he's doing, and you see the effect of his, and let's be very clear about it, ministry, it becomes very simple. It gets right to the heart and cuts through all this confusion, all this chaos, the war and the rumors of war, all that stuff, right? It cuts right through it. Very simple. It's like, hey, look, over here is faith, it's protection, it's all these things. And you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is accept and embrace this model, this paradigm, and no matter what happens, you're fine. You don't have to worry about that stuff, right? Now, in a weird way, that's why we're in such bad shape, because, people have done that. Nah, I don't have to worry about that. That's too big for me. That's way too much for me to handle. What can I do anyway? I'll just place my faith in Jesus Christ and the Lord our Savior and take care of everything. And oh, by the way, George Bush is a Christian. He's a Christian. I trust him. And trust me, that's why, that's how we got into a lot of problems. That was a really insane period where the evangelicals just went lockstep behind George Bush. He would have conference calls. George Bush would have conference calls every week with a group of church leaders. One of them was Ted Haggard, who is the fallen minister from the church in Colorado. Mega church, one of the biggest churches in the country. That was Ted Haggard's church. Ted Haggard was a very important man. He was having conference calls with George Bush on a weekly basis. And what they were talking about was messaging to the president and what kind of language to use in his speeches, and using the language in his speeches in the context of their sermons so that people would hear the speeches of the president, hear the sermons of people like Ted Haggard, and now all of a sudden, it's, God is talking through them, and the messages are lining up. This is what was happening back then. I'll never forget watching this Brian Williams. I think it might have been Williams or Brokaw. It might have been Brokaw. Brokaw did this special on faith in America, and he went to Haggard's church. This is all pre-Haggard fall, and this is great. I love this equipment out here. Anyway, he went to this church and he talked to this one woman, and the woman had her kids in the church daycare. I mean, everything was just so intertwined with the church. For her husband was like kind of on the periphery a little bit. It's like, I love her. She's the mother of my kids. I'll try to get into this, but it's not necessarily my thing. I'm not there 100%. And so Tom Brokaw asked this woman, well, how do you feel about politics? And she said, well, I've just got too much on my plate. I've got these kids. I got a household. I got to earn money. I've got too much on my plate, which is why, I turn that part of my life over from the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and President Bush is a Christian, so I trust him. And now I don't have to think about that. And that's where we are. And that's why we're dealing with these problems, because people have stopped thinking about that. They've buried their head in the sand with a particular kind of faith. But I understand that. When you look at all the problems in the world and how things are so complex and so chaotic, that a simple solution of somebody else or some other entity or some other force taking care of you and it is your only salvation, then why would you make that choice? If you didn't have the fortitude to try to understand it and see it for what it is. That doesn't mean you can change it. But at least by understanding it, you're a little more empowered than simply just hanging your hat on the likes of John Hagee and Pat Robertson and all those clowns. If you want to see a really good movie, it's called The Rapture, and it's with what's her name? Mimi Rogers and Will Patton and David Duchovny. It's kind of a hard movie to find, but it's a fascinating movie, and it gets into everything that I'm talking about with these questions of faith and protection, salvation, the rapture, afterlife. And it was written by two secularists. And ultimately, it is not a movie about the glory of faith, but it's more of an existential doctrine. It's a fascinating movie. I highly recommend it, just to spark some conversation between your ears. Okay, it's 10:56, and I'm going to bail out of here. And I want to thank everybody for listening to the show today. Wednesday, more astrology. Friday, I'm going to have Linda Kahanov, the Tao of Equus, on the show. And the next Friday, I think I'm going to try to have this guy, Les Visible. I don't know if you've ever been to his website. He's got a bunch of them. One is called Smoking Mirrors. The other is Zippity Doodah. Anyway, last week I reached out to Les, and he gets the guy gets, 20,000 hits, and 15 to 20,000 hits a day on his website. And he's got a number of people that are very similar to what I do, sans the astrology that he links to. And I sent him an email. I said, hey, would you mind, linking to me? I'll link back to you. And sure enough, he did. He's linked to me on all of his websites. And, my hits have gone through the roof on my website. So it's good. It's interesting. It's bringing me new people. And anyway, I'm gonna try to get Les on the show in 2 weeks. He's a brilliant writer and really interesting, kind of metaphysician and psychonaut. Interesting guy. Anyway, he's agreed to be on the show, and I'm thinking probably maybe next Friday. All right, so use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible, and just keep your powder dry, as they say. All right, this is Robert Phoenix. Thank you for the reminder. This is Robert Phoenix. You've been listening to the Monday Mashup, and I'll see y'all on Wednesday. Take care.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.